welcome to the video negotiating the terms of your LOI. Congratulations, you've gotten some offers in, and maybe you're down now to 3 or 4 different buyer options. It's time now to move from a term sheet offer to digging into the details of your letter intent. Once you sign an LOI, you're going to go under something called exclusivity, which means that you can only work with that particular buyer. Therefore, it's critical that you outline all major terms that you can in the LOI while you still have some negotiating leverage. We're going to talk about how do you negotiate the LOI and the key business terms that are inside that negotiation. We're going to talk about some of the key legal terms to address as well. We've been doing transactions at Northbound for years and years, hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions. And there's no definitive rule, I would call it, about how to negotiate an LOI. But we want to provide you with some core LOI negotiating concepts so you don't feel lost as you're going through this particular part of the process. First of all, first and foremost, you need to be negotiating all the way down to LOIs with multiple buyers. This is the time that you have the leverage. Once you sign an LOI, you're going to be exclusive with one buyer. And there's numerous times that you'll be convinced that the highest offer is ready. You'll go under an LOI and something will happen that makes you feel a little bit less comfortable about working with that particular buyer. And you don't want to be left without having a second or even a third option. So we always recommend negotiating with multiple buyers and not making a firm decision until you have quote unquote LOIs ready to be signed in hand. The second thing is you want to focus on a closing likelihood in excess of 90%. Do your due diligence with them and have them ask any questions of you that is important to them so that you can make sure to say to them, I want to let you know that I'm only going under LOI if I feel there's a 90% chance or better of closing. And you want to answer things such as, well, what if my numbers go down by 10%? Are we just going to adjust the deal or are you going to walk away? Because once you go under LOI and start doing due diligence and legal, your costs go up significantly. You'll want to feel 90% or better that you're going to close. So you want to make sure that all of the core economic terms are in the deal, the trailing 12 months earnings, the multiple, the guaranteed compensation, etc. But you also want to make sure that the core legal terms and what I call the legal framework is established right up in the LOI. And this is important because a lot of buyers will like to go under LOI quickly because it benefits them from an exclusivity standpoint and then quote unquote figure out the details later. And so in a way, your purposes are slightly different than theirs. While both parties want to get a deal done, it's better for them to not invest time until you're under LOI, and it's better for you to invest more time pre-LOI. And then you always want to make sure to have expert mergers and acquisitions counsel review. You'll have much better leverage if you split what you call the business terms, but then also have your lawyer reading it from a legal perspective to make sure that the reps and warranties and other terms, non-competes and those types of things are what's called market standard. We're going to now go through the different sections of the LOI and talk about some key terms you want to negotiate. The first one is, what is the time period on the earnings? There's multiple ways to do it. And for example, you can do it as an estimated at initially, which will be trued up to actual in the previous month before the close. Or you can lock in at the LOI stage what the actual period of the earnings is and the actual number. Or you can do a hybrid approach where you lock them in with an adjustment that could trigger it if it varies up or down in due diligence by more than a certain percentage. The key point is this: you can't negotiate that properly without having an accurate forecast. As I like to say, reason number 41 of why you want to be doing forecasting. For example, if your earnings is going up each month, then it would be to your benefit to delay the definition of the earnings period until the last close month before the transaction. However, on the flip side is that if your earnings is flat or maybe even has risk of decline, you may want to lock in the earnings at the LOI stage. And there are some pros and cons from a deal likelihood of closing that you need to consider. If it's not locked in, it's generally easier to close because everybody can adjust it to the latest information at the time. But if it is locked in, you get certainty around pricing. And I always like to say, always remember it's locked in quotes, but not locked in with an exclamation point, because ultimately, if you go under LOI and your earnings drops by 25%, you're either not going to close or you're going to have to adjust the deal. And if you do it with a hybrid, you'll get a little bit of a balance between those, which can increase closing likelihood. So here's an example of this term. The valuation established is based on your estimated trailing 12 months TTM EBITDA as of September 30th. However, actual consideration at closing will be adjusted to reflect the trailing 12 months EBITDA as of October 31st, 2022. So hopefully, as you see, just even on this one term as to what the right number to use is, there's multiple negotiations going on that you want to be aware of. Next up is non-contingent payments. This is the cash at close, which is typically only paid after a successful migration if you're an Amazon business. And you want to make sure to narrow that migration to as little responsibility as possible. So for example, you're selling in Amazon.com, Amazon UK, and Amazon Europe. It's notorious in Europe that it takes longer to migrate Amazon accounts. And let's say you only have 10 or 15% of your business there. You want to negotiate so that the only thing required for the migration is the Amazon.com migration. And I want to separate migration again from transition. A migration is what is going to be required to do before the escrow money is released to pay you. That's a far different thing than working with them over the next 3 months on a transition. So you want to make sure to narrow that list down to